Vienna, 1910. Adolf Hitler has no fixed abode. He's 21 years old and manages to secure a place in this men's hostel. To earn some money, he sells paintings of postcards to tourists. Adolf Hitler is of no importance, a nobody. And yet, 30 years later, he'd be the most powerful man in Germany. A man prepared to go to any lengths to achieve his goals, who would plunge the German people and the entire world into the 20th century's most murderous conflict, the Second World War. 6 years of war and 65 million dead, including 6 million Jews exterminated in death camps, a wound seared forever into the collective consciousness.
Adolf Hitler is the most bloodstained figure in human history.
The extermination of the Jews went on hour after hour without a pause, day and night. Sometimes as many as 10,000 people a day.
Hitler is conscious of what he's doing, and he's conscious of the potential consequences of his actions.
How, after living that early bohemian life, did Adolf Hitler become the architect of the final solution? What path did this son of a customs officer take to become the head of state? One man, a passionate historian, has traveled the world to establish the most exhaustive chronology yet of this journey. Harold Sandner has spent over 20 years picking apart Adolf Hitler's life hour by hour. Where was he during these early years and as he waged war? Where did he make his most momentous decisions?
Wherever Hitler was, that's where the power was. He was the very embodiment of an absolute dictator.
From France to Austria, via Germany and Belgium, we went searching for the final traces left by the dictator, to understand the ascent of a monster. This is the itinerary of Adolf Hitler. October 1918. The First World War is coming to an end. Adolf Hitler has been in the German army for the last 4 years, but the young soldier has to leave the front line, having been partially blinded by a gas attack. He learns of Germany's defeat from his hospital bed. Adolf Hitler is devastated.
The defeat of 1918 was an absolute tragedy for him, particularly traumatizing because he hadn't expected it.
Nobody in the government or the army had said there was going to be a defeat. Everyone thought they would win.
Hitler, like many Germans, believed that the defeat has been caused by enemies on the inside. Politicians, but not only them.
The Jews were a perfect scapegoat for the loss of World War I. He perceives the Jews as the secret guiding hand behind all of the other political movements pushed for the signing of the punitive peace at Versailles.
The year 1919 marked the beginning of his anti-Semitic tirades. But why did Adolf Hitler bear such hatred for the Jews? And how did he go from hatred to mass murder? A look back at the life of the man behind the world's worst ever crime against humanity. Adolf Hitler was born in Braunau am Inn, a small town in Upper Austria near the Bavarian border. It was on the second floor of this former inn that his mother, Clara Hitler, gave birth to him on the 20th of April, 1889 at 6:30 in the evening. His father, a civil servant in customs and excise, was named Alois Hitler. We accompanied Harold Sandner to Hitler's place of birth, where it all began, where the monster was born.
It's hard to imagine how this little baby grew up to be a mass murderer. A baby is by nature innocent. No one could have imagined how Adolf Hitler would turn out.
This will quite probably be the last ever film of Hitler's birthplace. The Austrian government plans to demolish the building to obliterate all trace of the dictator. Shortly after his birth, the Hitler family moved into this building just a short distance up the road. Hitler was only a few weeks old. On the 2nd of May, 1895, his father was promoted to the post of Inspector of Customs in Linz. So at the age of 6, Adolf Hitler started going to this small school in Fischelham, to the southwest of Linz. The dictator would return here in triumph on the 12th of June, 1939. This color film was shot by Eva Braun, later to become his wife.
Back in his old school, he was quite moved. He let these feelings from his childhood well up because his primary schooling had been rather good, unlike his later schooling, which was somewhat less satisfactory.
Through these images, Adolf Hitler presented himself to the Germans as a model pupil destined to have a brilliant political career. Pure propaganda, because the reality had been very different.
On the whole, Hitler had been a poor student, only doing well in certain subjects that he liked. In the end, he left school without any qualifications.
He hated school, he hated his teachers, and his teachers described him as lazy.
While Adolf Hitler showed little interest in school, he enjoyed playing in the fields, especially at war, in which he took the lead role. He was a born leader who liked to be in charge and boss his little friends around. But what he liked most of all was drawing.
He loved drawing, and his family was very admiring of his efforts. So at the age of 13 or 14, he decided that he was going to be an artist, a painter.
But his chosen vocation as an artist was not at all to his father's liking. Alois Hitler wanted his son to follow in his footsteps and become a civil servant like him.
When his father, Alois, found out that his son preferred drawing, he became aggressive and violent, regularly beating his son.
The clearest testimony is that of his sister, Paula, who said he often got a beating, but forced himself to remain stoic as he took the blows, neither crying nor begging.
In 1903, a tragic event gave him the chance to try to realize his dream. His father died. Hitler was 13 years old. Henceforth, nothing and no one could stand in his way.
The German ideal, a combination of strength, determination, and purity.
Hello, gentlemen. My son, Adolf. That used to be my desk before I retired, which is why you need to apply yourself at school.
Stupid old fool.
It's perfectly normal for a boy his age.
He's got cursed on me for marrying my niece.
Uncle, don't be absurd.
You'll get what you want in the end. You'll be a painter, an artist. Anything you want. Oh, my little genius.
You little bastard, you burned my beehives again!
Uncle, do you know what I think? I think We should take him out of school. He's so talented an artist, and what does he need with science and mathematics? Oh. Uncle? Uncle, what is it? Oh, my God! Addy, quickly, come help me with your father. Uncle?
I'm going to Vienna, Mother.
What?
I want to see opera. Great opera. I want to study at the Fine Arts Academy.
It's too far. You get lost. I've heard too many stories of Jews and gypsies taking advantage.
I'm not a boy, Mother.
She's very sick. She won't live until Christmas. She has cancer of the breast.
It's hard.
I know it's hard.
She'll do anything to ruin my career.
You may begin. At the end of 30 minutes, I will collect the sketches, and this time tomorrow, the names of those who have passed this part of the examination will be posted on the door.
Did you do well on your drawing exam? Were you accepted?
Someday I shall be a great artist, Mother.
I know you will. Angela, I know he's only your half-brother, but I want you to take care of him as if he were your own. He's so sensitive. I don't know how he'll survive without me.
Yes.
Amen.
Andy, I know it's hard, but you have to be brave.
Tell me how to feel. You didn't love her. She was only your stepmother. You wouldn't know how to love anyone. You're just a lump. A peasant. Good for nothing but breeding more bitches like you.
I'm sorry, Herr Hitler, you don't have a style. Your people are like little buildings. There's no life in them. Perhaps if you tried architecture or theatrical design. I'm truly sorry. I have a class to teach. Best of luck.
All right. Just waiting for my inheritance, that's all.
It's the Jews' fault, you know. Swarm into our country, steal the bread from our tables. Just ask our mayor.
They are wolves. Beasts of prey in human form.
It's all their fault, you know. They swarm into our country, take the food from our mouths. And here we are, German and hungry. It's not funny.
I'm sorry, I thought you were a Jew. You look like one.
Hussein, come on. You've got 10 minutes to get out of here.
My dearest sister, my studies are going very well here. My art is getting a lot of attention. I'll be famous before you know it. I look forward to my upcoming birthday when my inheritance is due. I wonder, could you bring it in person? I'll wait for you in the railway station, under the big clock.
Addy, it's you.
Angela?
Goodness, what happened? I thought you said you were doing fine.
Bit bad luck. Do you have it?
I wish you would have said something. You could have come home. Say hello to your Uncle Dolph, Gaily. She's a shy girl, but very affectionate.
Well, it's the Jews. It's the Jews, they run the galleries and won't buy my paintings. The Poles. They work for next to nothing, so I can't get a job.
That's terrible. You know, there's plenty of work in Linz.
Must be joking.
No, I'm serious. Here. Happy birthday. Our father worked hard for this.
It's the last place I would go.
You can't stay here.
Of course not. The sooner I leave this Babylon of races, the better. I'm off with the real Germans are.
War! Austrian Archduke's assassination leads to war!
Come closer! Listen. Let me speak! England, France and Russia are joining forces against our ally Austria. We must stand with her, united, ready to sacrifice. Our lives are nothing. Our country is everything. We are now only Germans.
Look at this baby. So gentle, so innocent. You'd think this child would grow up to become a good man, an honest man. Well, think again. Hitler was born Adolphus Hitler in 1889 in a small town in Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was born out of wedlock, but eventually changed his name to that of his stepfather, becoming Alois Hitler. Alois was a mid-level Austrian customs officer, not really rolling in cash, but certainly rolling in women. He married a rich, older lady, but then immediately started having affairs, including one with a much younger house servant. A few years later, he left his sick wife to be with his mistress, but since the Catholic Church didn't allow divorce at the time, he couldn't marry her. So he waited for his old wife to die and had a child in the meantime. Then his wife died, so he married his mistress and had another child, but then his new wife got sick, so he employed his much younger cousin Clara to take care of her. Then when his new wife died, he immediately got Clara, his cousin, pregnant, and then married her. In that order, you rock star. Clara and Alois had 3 children together, who all tragically died while in infancy. So when the 4th child, Adolf, came along, Clara spoiled him rotten. The Hitlers had 2 more kids, and the family moved around a few times, meaning Adolf had to attend 5 different elementary schools. Adolf's father was strict, quick to anger, and took most of it out on the eldest son until he had enough and ran away at the age of 14, leaving 7-year-old Adolf to do most of the chores and get berated by his father. The result was a difficult relationship with his dad, while he was super attached to his mother, who worried over him and his health excessively. Hitler did well in school at first. His grades were good and his teachers praised him. He was popular with the other kids and enjoyed gathering them together to play war games. He also loved reading and particularly liked stories about cowboys and Indians. As he grew older though, he started to get into trouble. He was caught smoking once, organized a raid on a local orchard, tormented his pro-Austria religion teacher with symbolic gestures, displaying his allegiance to the idea of united Germanic people under a greater German state in defiance of Habsburg Austria. You know, the usual. All of this enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. The area of Austria-Hungary that Hitler lived in was once part of the German Confederation, and many of the people who lived there considered themselves to be German. Adolf tended to just go against whatever his father said, and since his father was an Austrian public official, Hitler got big into German nationalism. This enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. Around this time, a family tragedy struck. His 6-year-old brother, whom he loved a lot, died of measles when Adolf was 10, and was buried in the cemetery just across from their home. Around this time, neighbors reported a change in the young boy. Strange behaviors such as talking to trees and staying up late staring at the stars from the cemetery walls. He lost interest in religion, and his school grades started to decline, which enraged his father, who punished him severely. It also didn't help that he had just entered high school, and the cool city boys treated him like a rural peasant. He had to repeat a grade and had little interest in most school subjects, instead spending his time reading and drawing, which he was quite good at. One day his father said, "Son, someday you'll be a big balls public official like me." And Adolf replied, "No, father, I'm going to become an artist and soar high above the clouds with the eagles." This enraged his father, but by this time he was an old-ass man, so he just sort of let it go, and then died of a lung hemorrhage. Hitler just about passed his final semester, and celebrated in the typical way, by getting blackout drunk and wiping his ass with a certificate. However, he didn't take the overall final school exam, instead just dropping out. The now 16-year-old boy was unemployed, without much purpose in life, and for the next 3 years he stayed that way. He spent most of his time at the opera with his only friend, August Kubizek. Kubizek later wrote his memories of the young Hitler, and said he was passionately interested in many things, felt he was in many ways better than others his age, was quick to anger just like his father, and an incredible speaker once he was ranting. When he was 18, he said a very sad goodbye to his mother and went to Vienna to take the entrance exam for art school. He failed. Soon after, he had to return home. His mother was sick, and her health was rapidly deteriorating. Hitler stayed by her side, and when she eventually died, the family doctor said he had never seen someone so overwhelmed with grief as Hitler was. Then Hitler returned to Vienna, still hoping to find a career in the arts, but he never did. Instead, without parental support, Hitler ended up on the streets. Now in his early 20s, he spent a few rough years living in and out of homeless shelters, making what little he could from selling postcards he painted. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when and how Hitler's extreme ideological beliefs formed, but his time in Vienna would have certainly played a role. Anti-Semitism was widespread in the city. The mayor, whom Hitler supported, was an outspoken anti-Semite. There were many right-wing anti-Semitic newsletters, which Hitler took a keen interest in. He bought into the conspiracy theories and became a firm believer in the idea that there are many races in constant struggle with one another, the purest of which were the German Aryan people, and the worst of which, he believed, were Jews. Since Austria-Hungary was a multi-ethnic empire full of lesser races, Hitler wasn't a fan. So when he was 24, he moved to Munich in Germany to avoid doing military service, and for one more year he was a drifter on the streets, until something huge happened. In 1914, long-standing tensions in Europe erupted into the First World War. Crowds across Europe celebrated the news. Within days, Hitler volunteered for the German army. The war gave him a purpose in life. His fellow soldiers gave him friendship and brotherhood. Despite the horrors of war, Hitler considered it to be the best time of his life. He was reportedly a brave soldier and was awarded the Iron Cross, first class. He was also very lucky and had many close encounters with death.
Adolf Hitler had no qualifications, but this did not put him off.
Hitler entered the exam fully expecting to be selected. If there's one thing that characterized him throughout his life, it's that he never doubted his own talent. He was always sure that his talent would be recognized.
Here are some of his drawings from that time. But Hitler was rejected. His lack of originality was held against him. But not only that.
Hitler didn't do any preparation work, thinking that his inspiration alone would be enough to win over the examiners. We now know that he failed the entrance for the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts twice.
Adolf Hitler found this rejection hard to stomach. In his book Mein Kampf, written years later, he described this day as the worst moment of his life. It was a trauma he spoke about to no one.
He was ashamed and humiliated at his failure and simply did not want to have to talk about it.
From November 1907, Hitler went back regularly to Linz. Only 2 months after his rejection by the Academy of Fine Arts, the young man found out that his mother was dying. Clara Hitler had breast cancer. She was being treated by a Dr. Bloch, who was Jewish.
He was distraught. For as much as he'd hated his father, he absolutely adored his mother. His mother succumbing to this disease marked him for life.
It was in this building in the center of Linz that Hitler spent days on end at his mother's bedside. Adolf Hitler drew her one last time on her deathbed. His mother was all the world to him.
You could say that his mother was the only woman he ever loved with a deep, genuine love. Right up to his death, he carried a photo of her in his wallet.
On the day of the funeral, the young Hitler warmly thanked Dr. Bloch for his care and promised him his eternal gratitude. And even though his anti-Semitic policies caused the death of millions of Jews, years later he kept his word. As Führer, Hitler spared the doctor's life, letting him escape to the United States.
He used an expression for Bloch that he never used for anyone else, Edeljude, or noble Jew, excluding him from the category in which he placed all other Jews.
Adolf Hitler was crushed by the loss of his mother. Back in Vienna, he lived in this building at Stumpergasse 31, a location rediscovered by Harold Sandner. Many documentaries erroneously claim that he lived in the yellow building next door. False information persistently peddled by the Third Reich and taken, unchecked, at face value by the media ever since.
I suppose that at the time they wanted to show a more attractive building, the one next door, because they didn't want people to know that, in fact, Hitler had lived in a bit of a dump.
The young Hitler was living off the money left him by his mother and was sinking gradually into depression.
He was living a bohemian life. He wasn't working, wasn't training for anything, wasn't studying.
He was a young man who rarely got up before noon.
And he was still like that even after he became chancellor.
Hitler lived off this money until the summer of 1909, when he could no longer pay his rent and found himself out on the street. Some nights he slept on public benches until the winter came, when he took refuge in homeless shelters. By day, he'd queue up at this convent, where the nuns ran a soup kitchen. At the age of 20, Adolf Hitler was homeless.
He had nothing. He was a nobody. He had no future.
In 1910, he moved into this men's hostel, which is now a very modern retirement home. He scraped a living by selling paintings he did of postcards to tourists. This marginal life went on for several years. But in Hitler's mind, none of this was his fault. He simmered with rage against the elite. They alone were responsible for the situation he found himself in.
And the elite were short-sighted, of course, because they couldn't see the genius of the young Adolf. This is something we notice here, and it's a definite character trait. He never questioned himself.
And his enemies among the Austrian elite were clearly identified by Hitler: the Jews. At the time, they held important positions in the economic and cultural life of Vienna. In 1913, Vienna was one of the most virulently anti-Semitic cities in Europe. On August 1st, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. This was the beginning of the First World War. Hitler was an Austrian national, but he volunteered to enlist in the German army.
Hitler considered himself an Austrian and a German. He thought they should form one nation and that all the Germanic people should live under the same roof.
He saw this conflict as an opportunity to change his miserable fate At a large patriotic gathering at Odeonsplatz, an historic square in Munich, Hitler was bursting with enthusiasm, as this photograph shows.
On this photo, he's brimming over with enthusiasm, almost in a trance. This war was his chance to forge an identity for himself.
From the 17th of March 1915, his regiment fought in the trenches near Fromelles, a small village in northern France. For a year now, Adolf Hitler had been a courier in the 16th Regiment of the Bavarian Infantry. This is the very bunker from which he'd ensure communications between the battalions on the front and the staff headquarters, delivering messages. This is an unprecedented find, revealed by our research. Adolf Hitler's role was not particularly glorious, but was all the same essential and decidedly dangerous.
Objectively speaking, Hitler was a very good soldier. He conscientiously obeyed orders. His superiors knew they could always count on him.
The rest of the time, Hitler would sometimes stay in this house in Furnes-en-Wep, a village a few kilometers from the front. In all, he would remain on French soil for about a year and a half.
All of a sudden, Hitler was enlisted, institutionalized, and taken care of. He had no worries about money or getting enough to eat. He'd found a place for himself in the army, and he was happy there. There was meaning to his life.